Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Welcome to Morning Shot. After an extensive parliamentary debate and calls for more groups of workers to be included, Singapore has passed a landmark bill to protect workers against discrimination. Under the bill, it's unlawful for employers to base employment decisions such as hiring, firing, and appraisals based on 5 categories of characteristics. They include age, nationality, sex, marital status, pregnancy status, and caregiving responsibilities, as well as race, religion, and language, and disability and mental health conditions. While the MPs spoke in favor of the legislation, they called for groups such as platform workers and those with less visible disabilities to also be protected. For more insights on all this, we're joined by Patrick Tay, Assistant Secretary General at NTUC. Good morning, Patrick, and Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, Happy New Year and good morning to Audrey and as well as all our listeners.
Thank you. Yes, it's always great to have you on the show, Patrick. So let's talk about this new bill. You know, it marks a significant step forward in protecting workers from discrimination in the workplace. So could you share some of the gaps that were not covered by legislation before this? And how far can this bill go in making sure that workers are not unfairly treated?
Yeah, actually, currently the tripartite guidelines on fair and progressive employment practices actually protect all workers from all forms of discrimination. And today, the labour movement, NTUC, as well as our unions, actually assist and support the union members at workplaces, including when they face discrimination-related grievances. However, currently victims of workplace discrimination are not covered under any form of legislation. So in a way, this new piece of legislation will help plug the gaps. In what way? Well, it provides remedies such as monetary compensation and basically stronger levers to take egregious employers to task or protection against discrimination faced by workers during not just in employment but also pre-employment and the end of employment. And this new piece of legislation will also help level the playing field and provide fair opportunities for workers by strengthening such protections against workplace discrimination. And to this legislation, I think one key thing that workers can be better assured of stronger levers to deter discriminatory practices and also have access to individual recourse. And unions can also leverage on this new piece of legislation as well as the tripartite guidelines to help workers better.
So a very important step for us. And Patrick, we know that you interact with many workers from different walks of life. What's the feedback from recent years? Have we been seeing more workplace discrimination cases? And what are your thoughts behind the challenges some workers face in proving that some form of discrimination has taken place?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Audrey. Actually, based on Ministry of Manpower's most recent report on fair employment practices, that's in 2023, the prevalence of workplace discrimination actually has declined over the years. However, anecdotally, I think it may seem otherwise because you do still hear cases of ageism, nationality discrimination. But one of the major challenges in addressing discrimination is that in many cases, it's difficult for workers to gather concrete evidence to prove that discrimination has occurred. So, for example, in recruitment, a job applicant may not be given clear reasons for being overlooked or shortlisted. And the discriminatory factors such as age or nationality usually will not be divulged and may not be openly stated by employers. And for example, during my ground engagements, I've heard from senior workers who shared that their experiences that their CVs are not even considered because of their age. And even if their age is not explicitly indicated in the job application form, sometimes the employer or the hiring manager can still infer their age to their extensive past work experience and tenure stated in their resumes. So the law, fortunately, will be complemented by these tripartite guidelines on fair and progressive employment practices to ensure that, victims of discrimination can now have access to recourse and justice. But I think, personally, legislation alone is not going to be the full solution. So we need to do more to complement this, including, examples, being more enlightened human resource and human capital personnel as well as staff, and, of course, employment policies and practices in place to fairly assess candidates based on the merit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it takes all of us to create positive workplaces for everybody. And during parliamentary debates, some MPs also raised concerns about groups like platform workers, people with less visible disabilities, and the LGBT community not being explicitly covered. So beyond this legislation, what additional measures do you think can be done to help make sure that these groups are sufficiently protected?
Yeah, I think I raised this in Parliament as well and spoke at the second reading debate. I think the Labour movement believes that no form of discrimination against workers should be tolerated. When workers must be treated fairly based on merit. And the Labour movement understands that the current approach for the first iteration of the legislation is to apply stronger levers using this new legislation to cover the most common forms of discrimination. I think the Minister shared that almost 95% of complaints today will be covered. But other forms of discrimination will continue to be covered under the tripartite guidelines for fair employment practices, what they call the TGFEP. So not to worry. I think although some may not be explicitly covered since it's the first iteration, it will be covered by the tripartite guidelines and will be investigated. And to complement this legislation, we will continue to work on upstream interventions to promote mindset change and tackle unfair practices holistically. In fact, NTUC and our unions have been working very closely with HR professionals and management to flag out potentially unfair practices and mindsets upstream in a way to proactively address some of these discrimination risks. So while the legislation when in place will help to deter and take every employer to task, it is ultimately another step in a continuous journey, I would say a really continuous journey to foster a fair and inclusive Singapore. And I want to reiterate again, I need all of us, it could be workers, it could be employers, members of society, we all need to play a part to achieve this.
Yeah, and I think that's a good reminder. This is just one single step in an entire journey. So let's turn to implementation now, putting all of this into action. What challenges do you foresee in applying this legislation consistently across all of the industries, specifically in sectors with less visibility like the gig economy?
Yeah, so different employers actually have different business needs and practices. So the legislation, the tripartite guidelines set out the broad principles, but each employer will have to apply these in their own context. For example, employers may have genuine occupational requirements that enable them to require their employees to have certain characteristics. For example, a spa serving mainly female clients, they need female therapists. I think that it provides for that. The new legislation will provide for that. And we hope with a deck of frequently asked questions, we'll be able to answer some of these so that employers will not run foul of the new law when it comes to the force. And the tripartite partners actually will be providing more deep guidance and not just FAQs, but employers can also approach TAFEP, the Tripartite Alliance of Fair and Progressive Employment Practices. We hope in the labour movement that our unionised companies will work closely with our unions to help them provide a more fair and employment and working environment for workers and remain on the right side of the law. And for the platform workers, the platform sector, it's a bit more different. Platform operators use algorithms to allocate work and determine payment rates for their workers. But regardless, platform operators will be required to comply with the Tripartite Guidelines on Fair Employment Practices and ensure that algorithms don't end up, discriminating against any of their platform workers.
Well, Patrick, I know you touched on this earlier, but now that this legislation is in place, I know it takes all of us and a big mindset change to create a more inclusive and equitable work environment in Singapore. Are there other areas of worker protection that you think require greater attention? Like, what are the next big steps here?
Yeah, so the legislation coupled with the Tripartite Guidelines will help make workplaces fairer. I think more can be done to make workplaces safer, for example, workplace harassment. And I'm glad that government has, will be elevating the current tripartite advisory on workplace harassment into tripartite standards. So there's an upgrade, I think, and hopefully we can read this out. Yes, there's a Prevention from Harassment Act, but over and above that, in the workplace, this will sort of set the stage for clarity in terms of workplace harassment, which is not specifically in a very, very explicit way explained in the Act. So you run concurrent with other legislation, and I most recently advocated for this more clearer, transparent guidelines and comms protocols to curb workplace harassment and bullying within educational institutions. But I think this can be further, cascaded to other sectors, industries, and institutions.
All right, Patrick. Well, before you go, of course, unions like NTUC play a pivotal role in advocating for workers' rights. So how will the union, support the implementation of this legislation? And what steps is NTUC taking to make sure that workers are informed and are aware of their rights and the resources that are available to them?
Yes, in fact, we are part, NTUC, including myself, part of this tripartite committee looking at the workplace fairness legislation. We hope, in fact, in this year, we prepare for the implementation of the new legislation to continue to outreach to workers, union leaders, as well as unions, and even our unionized companies to give them a better idea on how to comply with this new law. I think we'll not just frequently asked questions. We are looking at, in fact, we started some rounds of legal primers and training for our union leaders, which we will do, because we have some experience in navigating workplace disputes with employers, and we'll continue to leverage on the new legislation as well as the tripartite guidelines to continue to support workers facing all forms of discrimination, including those falling outside of the scope of the legislation. And like I said, all of us need to play a part, workers, employers, and members of society, to really achieve this goal of fostering fair and inclusive workplaces. And I think we will be on that journey, and we will continue to play our role to protect our members as well facing discrimination.
Well, all of us have a part to play, and this landmark legislation is a major step forward in fostering a fairer workplace, but the journey toward inclusivity and equity does not stop there. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing your insights on this important milestone and for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey.
Thank you. We've been speaking with Patrick Tay, Assistant Secretary General at NTUC. Stay ahead with Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.